So farmers want to say, is there an alternative? And when you come to the center, we say, look, we've got some options here, depending on what part of Missouri and what soils you have. We think that even on 25 or 50 acres, you could actually make a full living with the value of that crop. So I've been with the Center for Agroforestry since it was established by Gene Garrett in 1998. Agroforestry is an integrated field of study where we integrate trees, shrubs, crops, and livestock in systems. And when we think about traveling in rural areas in the Midwest, we see large monocultures of corn, large monocultures of soybean. We see cattle on open pasture baking in the sun. And agroforestry is a way to basically say, what can we do if we integrate systems to create more environmental benefits, maybe create some new economic opportunities as an alternative to the way we currently practice our agriculture. The key with agroforestry is you start with a perennial, a tree or a shrub, and then you integrate that with crops or livestock. At the core, we're taking perennials and then moving them into systems. So rather than just have the sun intercepting the corn, you can have the sun intercepting the trees at one level, the wheat at another level. So you're taking more advantage of the three-dimensionality of the system. You also find when you put these long-lived perennials in with annuals, the perennials actually are hosts for all kinds of beneficial insects and spiders, and so you create a lot more beneficial habitat for birds and insects, and so the whole cycling is much more efficient. And so when you studied the forests of the United States, the eastern hardwood forest from the Atlantic to the Mississippi is a very dense canopied original native forest. But as you move across the state of Missouri, you transition from pure forest to a savanna with widely scattered trees and tallgrass prairie to tallgrass prairie on the western end, right? So what we're doing in some ways is a little bit like the savanna idea, where you have trees and a whole variety of different plant species, forbs and grasses in the understory. We started to actually do the market research to prove either it is or it isn't a go, okay? And so what we know, for example, is that the chestnut program that we've established is a go. You can make a lot of money on chestnuts. The elderberry program that we've established is a go. We know that people can grow pecans. It's native to the state of Missouri, but most people grow only wild pecans. But like anything else, if you develop cultivars that have scab resistance, that yield better, et cetera, you can do better with cultivated varieties of pecan that grow well in Missouri than just wild seedlings that grow up and you have no idea how they're going to behave. And the bottom line is, if we don't feel that the market is really going to be a winner for the landowner, we tell them that. So the last thing we want to do is blow smoke, right? We want to say, look, here's the data, we've surveyed, we've analyzed, this is a go. In Missouri, we have these great sandy loam soils that go from St. Joe to St. Louis and up and down the Mississippi, right? So our River Hills lush soils are phenomenal for tree crops. The River Hills soil is over at the Horticulture and Agroforestry Research Farm where we have our chestnut collection. And so what we've learned is that if you pick the right cultivar, we started out with 60 some, we now have about 6 favorites. We eliminated those that had small nuts or didn't yield well, or that the branches broke off, or any kind of trait that wasn't positive. But if you pick those best cultivars, you can easily get a ton of chestnuts on an acre. Easily, probably more, in those right soils with the right management. By the time the trees are 7, 8 years old, they start to yield, say, 400 or 500 pounds. Right. By the time they're 12 years old, the yield curve just jumps. These grafted cultivars in the River Hills producing 2,000 pounds, let's just say they can do better. But at 2,000 pounds an acre, you can easily sell these direct to the consumer for $5, $6, $7, $8 a pound. So do the math. You're grossing $10,000, $15,000 an acre. You show me which corn acre is going to produce, right? The prices for fertilizer and many inputs is sky high. Price of gasoline, unfortunately, right now at least, is sky high. Diesel is sky high. So the input costs are high, but the prices aren't necessarily high right now, okay? So farmers want to say, is there an alternative? And when you come to the center, we say, look, we've got some options here, depending on what part of Missouri and what soils you have. We think that even on 25 or 50 acres, I'm not talking about 5,000 acres, you could actually make a full living with the value of that crop. So we really want to provide the landowner with new alternatives. And again, we'll tell them how to grow it, where to grow it, how to maintain it, how to harvest it, post-harvest it, where the markets are, and then the landowners are smart and they take it from there. When we first became confident that chestnuts were a winner, we started in 96 to 98. We offered our first training program in 2009. Bill Stouffer came with Sue Ellen. They attended that course. They said, we're going to try it. So they started to plant chestnuts, and they, smartly, they just sort of eased into it because this was new for them. But they now have 20 acres, and one of the things that we also recommend is that it should be under trickle irrigation. Because as we know in Missouri, sometimes from July 1 through the end of August, we can have 100-degree days and no rain. If you want to ensure a really good crop, you want to be able to turn that trickle irrigation on if we have a drought year. Right now, this year, you wouldn't need it. So my vision is that a lot of landowners in Missouri, and we're seeing this more and more, are becoming more and more aware of all these different opportunities. And so they say, I'm going to diversify. I'm going to start with some small portion of my acres. Maybe my adult son or daughter wants to do something different than what I do in terms of corn or soy. So let me set aside 25 acres and they can play there. But that may become the future of the farm. We're very optimistic about all of this. We have what we call 6 different agroforestry practices. The one that everybody knows back to the Dust Bowl of the 1930s is windbreaks, where the soil was just blowing away back in the 1930s because we had 5 or 6 years of drought. FDR, the president, basically worked with his Secretary of Agriculture, and they started to put in windbreaks all across the Great Plains. And we also have something where we can try to protect stream quality. We call that riparian forest buffers. So you put in some kind of complex of trees, shrubs, and stiff stem grasses downslope from the corn or the soy, and that can intercept all of the chemicals that are heading toward the stream. Then we have alley cropping like Bill Stouffer with his chestnuts and his winter wheat. We have forest farming where you can, under the right forest conditions, produce a valuable crop like a ginseng medicinal. And they just need deep shade. If the trees are crowded enough to create shade, you can plant underneath. So in certain parts even of the north slopes of the Missouri Ozarks, we have sugar maple native. And under sugar maple, which often likes a nicer, moister soil, you can underplant ginseng. And you can do forest farming, or golden seal, or echinacea, or black cohosh. All these have market value. Another one is now, like at the Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture, that's called urban food forests, where people are doing these multi-strata plantings in an urban setting to show people on a very small scale what you can do with this multi-strata, trees at the top, shrubs underneath, medicinals below that, and just an infinite combination.